Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Mr. Michael Marcial is in the house. We've been efforting him for almost a good year. Michael is founder of the High Ticket Accelerator. Michael, welcome to the show.
I am pumped to be here. It's been almost a year getting this lined up. 3 busy individuals, and here we are. So got to bring the heat today.
Got it.
No pressure, Michael. No pressure.
Oh yeah, none at all. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've been following you for quite some time. You've got a pretty interesting journey and story. Before we get into all the business, high ticket stuff, tell us a little bit about where you are now and how you got here.
Yeah, great question. Currently, on the professional side, I do run the High Ticket Accelerator, and it's kind of a really fun, place for me to be because it kind of, it's kind of a coalition of all of the things that I really love to do: brand, building great offers, driving leads for that offer, building sales teams and systems, all the nerdy stuff. I'm kind of a nerd. We'll get into it, no doubt. And I do a fair bit of speaking as well. This last month was my 226th day on stage. So wow. A lot of time in front of some people, and yeah, my community of people around me that I get to help and train and teach and open up this wacky brain of mine is growing. I think we've got about 4,500 people that have been through our programs now, and and I get to hang out with cool guys like you guys. So that's a little bit of my story in a nutshell.
So how did you get into the position you're in now in the High Ticket Accelerator program? There's got to be a background in sales and or marketing that led you to want to blaze your own path and start your own business.
Well, I mean, the way that I got there was through hustle, right? And so that's why, the show really resonated with me. And I know that we'll talk a little bit more about that, but, I'll take it way back until when I was 14 years old. I'm 39 now. I have my 40th birthday in a few weeks. And when I was 14, I got my first job. I was a busboy at an Italian restaurant. I won't name names. They're not around anymore, but just for legal reasons, they paid me cash under the table because I wasn't old enough to work there. Forget about it. And it was great. It was phenomenal. And, that word hustle, the first time I actually saw what that meant in real life was being a busboy there. The 2 other gentlemen that I worked with were probably in their mid 40s or so. And the word hustle, they embodied it. Like they were just on it. They said, hey, just keep up and do what I do and you'll be fine. So they're whipping around the restaurant, doing all the stuff they need to do. And I was like, I guess this is what work looks like. And so that's kind of where I started. I did that job. I had a couple other little odd jobs, but from an early age, I was just like, yeah, I guess this is work ethic. Like you just go all out, balls to the wall. That's what it looks like. And so I carried that through the next 5 years. And when I was 19, I left college. Didn't really see a future being a math teacher. Told you I was a nerd. Okay. I didn't want to be a math teacher. And so I left. I started a small business with a friend of mine when I was 19. And yeah, that was 20 years ago, which is kind of weird to say. And the last 20 years was just growing skills on skills on skills with that same balls to the wall kind of mentality.
It's incredible. One of the things that we talk a lot about, which you'll allude to, is that hustle is contagious, right? I mean, apathy is contagious too, but hustle can really spread. And I love how, to your point, at 14, it spread to you, right? And I think a lot of times that people miss that. I think in today's environment in particular, so many people are trying to protect, especially their kids, from the struggle, from the fail. And in the reality that the fail is what drives it, right? The struggle is what drives it because it's never going to get easier. And so building that muscle of how do I show up every day? How do I go that extra speed, right? How do I do that extra thing? And doing it for 20 years, right? Making it a business work from the ground up. I mean, it's every day, right? Because tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and that work, that underground work ethic that you have is something that, frankly, I think we need to teach more of and needs to spread more. But I love how just at 14 you're able to see that.
Yeah, I honestly I don't know if I really got it at that point because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, this is how work is done. I'm 14. It's my first real job, and this is my introduction to it. And so, yeah, the mentality definitely spreads. And I love looking back at my own story, and other stories too. But looking back at little 14-year-old Mikey, and Mr. Teo, as I called him, 45, just on top of it. I'm like, okay, this is just what it is, And so if he were any different, if he didn't have that internal drive, who knows? Who knows where grown up Mikey would be? Probably not on this podcast.
Love it.
So it spreads. It spreads, and I love the action behind the word for sure.
Right. Well, I think what the other thing we've seen is, I think a lot of times when people think about how do you achieve these things, they also believe that it's almost mindless hard work. Right. And we a lot of times we hear from people as we talk about the concept of hustle. A lot of people equate hustle to burnout. And one of the things we've seen is that it actually makes sense, because in some cases, the reason hustle has led to burnout is because people are just aimlessly pouring themselves into something without being cerebral, without really thinking through, like, what is my vision? What am I trying to accomplish? Where am I going? How might I get there? And, make no mistake, if all you're doing is thinking about it and never working on it, that's not going to work either. But, it's really, how do we combine those things? And so as I think about your journey, I'm just curious. Obviously, you've had a tremendous amount of pivots to get to where you are today, right? From busboy to what you're doing today, there's a lot of micro pivots there. I'm just curious, like, from more of a kind of a cognitive approach in the different pivots that you've taken, like, how have you seen that? How have you tackled that? Because I think, otherwise people can just speed towards burnout because they're not really willing to pivot or willing to understand where they need to change.
Gosh, that's such a great question. It's very nuanced too, and we know that we've been through it. We've all pivoted and done some fun stuff, but I think what it really boils down to is, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, they only see from the outside somebody's story, somebody's journey, and it leaves a lot to the imagination. Right. And so we have to fill in the blanks. If this is important to us, our entrepreneurship journey, our career, our fill in the blank, whatever is important. If I have to just look from the surface level out, and I have to make up the story of what it takes to be, do, or have that thing, I'm probably not hitting the mark. Because we know just from looking at social media that the crust, the outside layer, is not always what it seems. Right. I wish that my best shirtless selfie is how I look all the time.
Yeah.
After the pump in the gym, great lighting, a little sweat, a little glisten.
Yeah.
I wish. All right. When I woke up this morning, I felt like a piece of it. And I'm sure you can edit this out. I felt like not that best version.
Yeah.
I felt like poop, because my daughter will watch. So with that being said, if we only look from the outside in, we're not getting the full story. We don't know what those pivots and the mental load, the emotional load, we don't know what that looks like. And this is why I love podcasts. This is why I love being on stage. This is why I love sharing the real stuff, so that people get the depth and the breadth of what that actually looks like and feels like. So when I look back, when I was hustling aimlessly, going towards burnout, and I've hit that mark several times, it's because I'm like, okay, all it takes is just going balls to the wall, ignore everything else. There is no such thing as pain or hurt or turmoil or challenges. I don't believe in challenge. No obstacle in my way. I read the book. Obstacle is the way. So it's fine. Okay. This is all great. And yet I can burn out because I didn't really understand it. And so when I look back, there's this moment where we shift from, consuming content to creating. There's a moment where we stop living by default, letting life kind of dictate the way, and we start living by design. And inside of that, I've kind of adopted this mentality of not balance, but priority. Like, I get to choose what needs to be, what deserves to be at the forefront of my decision making. Is it my health right now? Or is my health doing really great and I've got the habits and I'm doing the things, and I can not necessarily put it on autopilot, but it doesn't have to be so cerebral about it. And I can focus on the relationship with my daughter, or or focusing on connecting with people through podcasts right. And so I get to dictate what that looks like. And so I think if we really start to dissect what we see on social media from the people around us, and we get deep into that, into the real stuff, and we realize that it's actually just a series of our own internal compass leading the way. We get to make the decisions that drive us forward on that.
Michael, you said something really interesting that stood out to me. Fill in the blanks. And you talked about the outer crust. I love all of this. Now, we don't know each other personally, but I followed you on social media. You've had some really interesting pivots throughout your career. I'm guessing you have a very interesting story, as I believe we all do. How important do you think it is to fill in the blanks?
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to that idea. Like if I'm looking from the outside in, I want to know, how did Mr. or Mrs. Success Story get to where they got? And I'm never going to know everything. I'm not going to have all the information, and this is where there's some core principles that I think need to exist if we're going to be successful, or at least feel like we're moving in the right direction, feel like a success. And, being kind of committed to that vision of, hey, I want to hit this goal, or I just want to become the greatest version of myself. That commitment comes with making decisions when we don't have all the information. We have to make some assumptions. I'm a math nerd. I don't like saying it, but I actually do. Okay. I really do like saying it. I'm not that smart. I just happen to think in terms of if then. Well, if this is the answer, then how do we get there? We have the answer. We know it exists. So there's got to be a plethora of ways that we get there. And if I don't have all of the X's and Y's and I don't have all that information, cool. Well, we got to the answer somehow. Somebody did. So if I know that this is X, then let me just solve for Y. So yeah, we can't fill in all the blanks. We just never will. We won't have all the answers, and we got to move anyway.
Yeah, as a fellow math nerd, I love the fact that it's a math equation. I actually have a T-shirt that I wear for our sales team every once in a while, which is just a math problem.
Nice, nice.
Because everything's a math. But to your point, going a little bit beyond that, right? Of how do we fill in the gaps? I think one of the other things that you're kind of alluding to, and I'm curious who these people may have been along your journey. When you talk about filling the gaps, today more than ever in history, we have the ability to learn from other people. And I think so often one of the gaps that people have as they're trying to fill in those gaps is they're trying to do it all themselves. And when in reality, if you just took a minute to just think about, okay, someone else has probably solved this problem somewhere, someday previously. Yeah. And maybe they wrote a book, maybe they did a podcast, maybe they're online, maybe they're just on LinkedIn. Maybe I just need to ask some people, but I'm curious as you've progressed through your career, who are maybe some of those people that have helped you fill in some of those blanks that has allowed you to then propel forward?
Absolutely. Great question. And yeah, I mean, that is the L of hustle, right? Learning from others.
Right.
And
yeah.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of this, this approach. The first person that actually comes to mind is one of my really good friends, Hunter Ballou. He is out of South Carolina. We met through social media about 6 years ago or so. And, I liken this to dating. Okay. I met some guy online. Okay. He slid into my DMs and he's like, "Hey, Michael, nice to meet you." I'm like, "Hey, good to meet you too. Hey, do you want to fly out to South Carolina and speak at my event in 7 weeks?" I'm like, "Buy me a drink first. All right. Tell me more." And so that was the start of our relationship. I booked my flight out to South Carolina, spoke at 45 person event, and we got to connect. We got to meet, and I got to really understand this person deeper than what I saw on, Facebook profile. And the one thing that I really pulled from him, learning from others, is that he, whether it's conscious or not, he stays in big picture visionary mode. He lives in that space. He doesn't concern himself about the equation necessarily. He just knows that, hey, this is the answer. This is the result that we're going for. And it's possible. It's possible because I can see it. That's all I know. That's all I care about. Let's go. Right. Whereas at that moment 6 years ago, I was very much so rooted in, whoa, hold on. Mr. Integrator walks in. I'm like, well, hold on. Let me do the equation. And then, and he's like, no, we don't have time for that. We're doing the thing. And this has shown up several times in our relationship. Like, I spoke at that event, and like 3 months later, he pivoted and made another event in the roofing space. That is now, like, this is the 5th year. This last event that they had last year had like over 4,500 tickets sold to the event. Right. And goodness. So he just stays in the big picture mode. And that's, again, learning from others. That wasn't a muscle that I flexed all the time. And just being in his corner, being in his life, knowing him as a human, I get to see that it's not just for the show of it. It's just because that's just who he is. That's what he's obsessed about, the outcome. And that's highly influenced my own life. I wouldn't have grown businesses. I certainly wouldn't have been speaking on as many stages and podcasts if I didn't think big picture, keep in that visionary mode. So learning from others. Love that. It's a time machine. It'll fast track you through literally all of your problems. It's a who, not how kind of situation.
For sure.
Sounds like you like to read some books. Who, not how.
I like books. You picked up on it.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I'm really curious to learn more about the High Ticket Accelerator that you have. But more specifically, let's start with, how did you get into this?
Yeah, the high ticket kind of sales space. I would say really, when I was 19, starting a business, figuring out all the details, talk about hustle. Like, it was just, I had to figure out marketing. I had to figure out sales. I had to figure out product. I had to figure out how to show up on a video. Like, I had to figure out the technical stuff. I had to figure out building a website, all the ins and outs. And that's tough. That's tough. There's a lot to it. And we haven't talked yet about the personal life stuff. I liked to sleep. I just didn't do a lot of it at that time. I liked to have girlfriends, but maybe not yet. Right. So with that being said, I spent 4.5, almost 5 years building this company from very humble beginnings to, I think maybe like $500,000 a year or something like that. Nothing wild, nothing crazy, but it was fun. And I learned a lot, and we had a lot of hard lessons and a lot of growth that happened in that time frame. Well, if we fast track this, I realized something back then that I wish I knew all along, which is I don't have to do all this stuff. Who, not how? When was that book written? Yeah. Okay, when did I find it? Not soon enough. Not soon enough. Okay, and so I started to apply that to the people in my circle. I was like, wait a minute. Here's Joe working his tail off, doing all these things, and he's not great at building a brand, and he sucks at sales. So why on earth is he doing this to himself? And therein lied, that was the problem that I wanted to solve. This is about 9 years ago when I kind of shifted gears from like e-commerce, building products online, to working with more entrepreneurs and that leader. And the first problem I wanted to tackle was brand. I was like, okay, you're phenomenal at what you do. You're a great coach, a great entrepreneur. You have a great offer, but I wouldn't believe that you're the expert. Therefore, I wouldn't pay you any money. So we need to solve this. And I was really good at building brand. So that's where I started. I started making an offer to my friends that had sucky brands. And that's where I started. And now we can start to see the domino effect of saying, okay, wait a minute, you look the part, but your offer actually isn't all that great. Like, I know hundreds of entrepreneurs that have phenomenal offers, coaching and courses and communities that they're building. That ain't it.
Yeah. Right.
So now I was like, hey, wait a minute, I built a great brand. Let's revamp your offer. Let's make it a world-class offer. Let's make it $100,000 offer for 10K, for 4K, for 5K, whatever the details are. Let's offer so much value for the price. So we started doing that. And now we had the other problem, which was we have leads coming in. They're like, whoa, this guy and or gal looks amazing online. feels like the right fit for me. The offer's insane. Let's hop on a call. And then that's where Fumble City comes in. Not having a process, don't know what to say, kind of overkill, a 2-hour conversation that leads to a, let me think about it, send me an email. And I was like, guys, we're dropping the ball here. And so that's where High Ticket Accelerator really starts to put on the gas, pedal to the metal, where I was like, at first, let me teach you, Mr. Entrepreneur, Mrs. Entrepreneur, let me teach you. And then I realized I'm doing you a disservice by just doing that, because now you're stuck in the sales seat. You're not going to grow that way. You're not getting to 7-8 figures or whatever the goal is. So now let me shift gears, right? And the growth internally for me was just, let me solve the problem. And I started to put out my own sales content. What's my philosophy on high ticket sales or just selling in general? How do we close the conversation? Are we going to work together? Put out some of that content. And before I knew it, I had hundreds of people interested in finding a job selling for other people. And I already had the people that needed the help. So I just kind of bridged the gap and said, hey, Mr. Entrepreneur, Mrs. Entrepreneur, you have a problem here. You are the bottleneck. Let's get yourself out of that seat. This is what high-level entrepreneurs do. And let me build the sales systems and the sales team so that this will never be your problem again. And that's where High Ticket Accelerator kind of really flourished. So yeah, that's the story in a little bigger nutshell.
So when you're working with brands, I'm really curious, because we've worked with a lot of companies in kind of a similar size. What do you see as being 2 or 3 of the most common issues with your clients and prospects?
Great question. I would say, number one is a lack of systems. I'll use that word. It's kind of a broad stroke, but more specifically, the clients that I work with, the issue is usually found or is presented through sales. They have a sales bottleneck, whether they don't have the right talent or they have the right talent but not the right training. They've done a great job or maybe even a poor job of recruiting, hiring, onboarding, training, and supporting their team. And so it's kind of a luck of the draw as to who's on their team. If they even have one, they don't even know where to start to grow their team. So there's no real system inside of the sales world. And they don't know, or they're not aware of how to build those systems. So that's usually number one, is the system. And then kind of a subset of that is the people. They haven't really spent a lot of time on developing culture. And so when they have this open funnel of bringing in talent or building their team, it's like, okay, you have the right background, but sure, yeah, you can be part of the team, but it's the culture's not there. So that means the love of that mission isn't there. That means that passion isn't there, which is essential when we start talking about hustle and burnout. If I don't know where we're going, I'm going to get burned out. If I'm just trucking along or just doing work for an untold number of years, well, that sounds like a job to me. It sounds like a dead end to me. It sounds like I'm dying internally, right? So we didn't focus on building culture, which allows us to build a better team. So yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting nuance inside of that, as far as the things that people are actually struggling with. And it feels like the team's not pushing. It feels like things keep breaking. It doesn't feel like the dream that I had is what it comes down to. So yeah, I get into the nerdy stuff, but it's really for the emotional reason of like, let's have a kick-ass experience and do some awesome things, help a lot of people, make a lot of money.
I love how you're focusing on what a lot of people would call as the basics. I think so many people are looking for this silver bullet, right? And this is the way that this is going to happen. And don't get me wrong, I think there's some people that they do really well in the basics, but to your point, they have no brand, they don't have a great offer, they don't know how to pull it through, right? But I think what you shared, I think, is so critical, because I feel like so often with business, it's so easy to have the shiny object syndrome and think of here's the next big thing, and this is what we need to do, and then you kind of dig into it and you say, all right, well, no one else in the market is offering this, no client is asking for it, we're not even really sure what problem it's solving.
Yep.
But we're selling tickets to our own show, so we're excited about it. So let's just do it. And by the way, that's going to prevent us from doing all the stuff we actually promised we said we were going to do, right? And I think it's such an interesting balance in business, is that it's so easy to kind of fall prey to that, and yet, when with working with all the different businesses that you do, you call it the nerdy stuff, but the reality is, like, that's the engine, right? I mean, that's the stuff that not everybody has. And that's why they, to the point of filling in the blanks, right? That's why they need people to help them fill in sometimes just those basic gaps.
Yeah. Yeah. And, this is, if we follow like the EOS model of having the visionary and integrator, I've lived in both of these seats long enough where I feel like I'm in a unique space where I kind of live in the gray middle zone there. Because I understand vision and I can totally play that ball game, but we don't also need two drivers of the race car. What happens with the engine? Who's maintaining that? Right? Was it built to do the 500 laps in the first place? Some of these questions need to be asked, and so so I understand the translation between those two kind of camps, and that's where I like to live, because, listen, I get it. We have the big vision. We want to move towards the thing. And it feels nice to say that we have the latest AI thing, and we have the funnel that everyone else uses, and we have the fill in the blank, the position that for some reason everybody keeps hiring for. It doesn't do anything. It is not vital for our operation. Whatever the thing is, like, I get it. It's exciting, and we want excitement. And also, it's really exciting to have a system that works phenomenally, and that we can bring in amazing, amazing people into our team. And they're walking into a multi-7-figure mansion versus the show version of that, like the prop set version of that, where facade looks nice, siding looks great. You get in, and there's no walls, no furniture, no nothing. Right? That's not what we really want. And so I get it. Like, we want to talk about funnels and systems and sales and all the fun stuff, but I mean, we got to get real at the same time, that we need the translation between, hey, if you're the integrator, if you're the builder, and we don't have a clue as to where we're going, we haven't started having these kind of conversations, awesome, let's do that. Let's set the core foundation of the brand. If we are that visionary and yet things keep breaking, we have a lot of turnover, we hired our best friend that's a genius at this thing, and they're still not with us. They aren't driving the metrics we want, or whatever the case might be. We have a translation problem. We have a communication gap between the engine and the tires. We need that transmission fuel. So that's where I like to live.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun just being able to serve people at the highest level to literally live out their dreams through their business. It's freaking awesome.
Michael, you talk a lot about these high ticket programs, and as someone who spends a lot of time online for business every day, I see there are a lot of entrepreneurs, there are a lot of personal brands, there are a lot of businesses that have these coaching programs and masterminds and other high ticket offers. It almost feels as though, and maybe it's just me, but it feels as though it's a very saturated market. What do you think?
I would say my first pass surface level answer is absolutely, it's saturated. And this also is a symptom of what we were talking about. If I'm looking from the outside in, like, let's think about the average path that somebody might take, right? We got kind of maybe lucky or fortunate. We studied something in college. Maybe we didn't go to college. We got a job because we need to pay bills or whatever. We want a nicer car. We did the thing. We got the car. What's left? We rise through the ranks of the company. I went from, just an individual contributor to a manager to now maybe I'm a director, and I realized that's not my dream. That's not what I wanted. I know 9,000 people that are these business coaches online, and it looks pretty great. All of them make 7 figures. All of them travel all the time. All of them eat out at fancy restaurants with their Rolexes. What am I doing? Comparison is the thief of all joy. So now I hate my life. Okay. And I'm going to do this thing. All the buzzwords feel like me. I'm disciplined. I make my bed every morning. I have my protein oatmeal. that I made the night before. So I'm already kind of halfway to millionaire status, right? So all the trappings have lured me in like a moth to a flame. Okay. And so what happens when we make the jump? Like the real jump, like my jump. My jump was I'm making $180,000 a year. I have the house, I have the cars, I have the trips. I feel successful. Don't look at my body because I'm horribly out of shape. I'm tired and I feel gross. So if I can just get out of that feeling and jump into entrepreneurship, I'm going to be fine because all my friends are, perfect. I make the jump and then I realize, oh shit, this is not what I thought it was. More people I meet, this is present day me. The more entrepreneurs I meet, the more I realize, hey, we're all just humans. We're all just trying to do this thing. And, to go back, I guess, to the question, is it oversaturated? Of course. There's no barrier to entry to becoming an online entrepreneur in any regard. You can put together a high ticket offer tomorrow. You could slap a $10,000 price tag on anything that you want, right? And there's no one that says you can't. So why not? And all of this sounds good. But here's where we wipe away the facade, and we look a little deeper. This is the more philosophical version of Mikey coming out. Okay, but when we start to really look at who's in the game, it's the people that, yes, they carry either big vision or they're great builders, and they have been ruthless. They have been obsessed with building the fundamentals first and allowing that to be so freaking good that there is no competition. Okay, maybe Joey gets some clients and, making 50 to 60K a year, whatever the case might be. Great, because what we have is so good that our clients are telling their friends and telling their friends and telling their friends. And we're growing past the 6 figures into the 7 figures. We're doing $500,000 a month. We're doing $1 million a month, and it just will continue to grow. That's the difference. The difference is we are getting into the lab. We are focusing our hustle muscle in the fundamentals. We really are. So the difference, and the reason why I don't mind if, there's other high ticket sales trainers or system people or whatever, is because nobody else has sat in the seat for 20 years and nobody else has put the blood, sweat, and tears in to make sure that what we do is highly effective, will work, and have the same kind of outcomes. And if they do, then awesome. They're my friend. I need to learn from others. They're in my circle. We talk on the phone. You know what I mean? So yes, it is absolutely saturated out there. But for the select few that are willing to play the real game, the systems game, the nerdy stuff, hey, maybe I'm not the visionary by trade, but like I'm going to learn that piece because that's what's required. And I have to grow into being the person that's going to grow the thing. That's the real stuff. The other stuff is just the symptom of doing those pieces. So
love that.
Just cut me off, guys. Literally, this is good. Just push the mute button.
I think the other thing, when we talk about saturation, Chris and I have talked about this, is I think, to your point, the barrier to entry is 0, right? So, anybody can say they can do something. But I also think the lens a lot of times is it's not looking at it through what is the problem we're trying to solve and how can we uniquely solve it. And I think that's so critical. And then, one of the questions I have for you is when we think of the high ticket, I think, as we've talked to, a lot of people that are in this space, and I don't know that I've ever gotten a great answer of the, how do you differentiate between what you should do as a high ticket versus what you should do that's a scalable product, right? Because I think that's often kind of the yin and the yang, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people that they just want to do a high ticket offer because they feel like that's the shortest path. Only they don't really have something of significant enough value to charge that, right? Sure. And so then they fizzle out. And there's so many different schools of thoughts of like, do you just focus on building a single high ticket and go that way? Do you start by building a community and build proof of concept at a lower price point to build up to that? Just curious in your experience, how do you kind of make sense of all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's one a lot of people struggle with too. So it makes sense that you didn't get maybe a great answer. And so maybe I'll still step into that camp, but I'm a realist, right? So when growing my own brand, I had to take inventory of what do I have? What's in front of me? What are my assets here? And I think either, well, and this is different for everyone, but either you have a decent following on social media for whatever reason, you networked really well, you put out some content, whatever the case might be, you have a lot of people here. Or the flip side of that is instead of having a wide network, you have kind of a deep network. These are like higher level people. Somehow you're shoulder to shoulder with maybe fewer people, but these are people with a lot of pull. They have large networks themselves. So it's kind of a second degree version of this thing of having a large network yourself. And what I found myself doing just out of maybe habit or necessity is I started to build a wider network. It wasn't extremely deep. I wasn't really connected with all of these people, but I was kind of like, they kind of knew what I was all about. I kind of knew what they were all about. And that was my asset. So what does that mean if I have the quantity? Well, you might say, let's go high ticket. Let's build a 5K, a 10K, a 50K thing. And I know so many people, if enough people, if I do the math and if I only get 1%, then I'm going to be a billionaire, right? Sure, makes sense. But why on earth would somebody drop $48,000? It's our high ticket offer. Why would somebody drop 48K with me if we don't know each other, if we don't have the depth, if we don't have the relationship? I wouldn't, right? So we've already missed the boat, most likely, if we didn't really look at the assets we have in front of us. So what did I do? Well, one of the first offers that I had was, now I'm going to call myself out. My very first real offer was a course, $297. I did the math. At the time, I had like maybe, 12,000 connections on social media. I was like, oh, I'm wealthy. Got it. 297 times 5%. All I need is 5%, guys. And then this is how it works. Well, my first course was crap. It didn't have a lot of value. I just put it together because the math made sense. And I sold exactly goose egg $0 of that course. Maybe you can edit in some or like, oh, okay, or something. I don't know. Whatever you guys want to do. This is your show. So then I was like, okay, that's reality slap. Let me really, get back to my roots. What do people need? What is my asset? I have a few thousand people here. So let me start asking them. Let me poll them. Maybe they'll just tell me what they want. And they did, including price point, deliverables, outcome, lesson learned, information, whatever it was. I went back to the drawing board and I created exactly that thing. And I did it way better than I thought that they thought I would. That was the real shiny, cool thing. I'm not just going to put some information together and there you go. No, had a really cool system, built a community on top of it. It was better than the next thing. $97, so a third of the cost of my previous course. In that same year, it didn't break any records, but we sold 700 seats to that course, made 70 grand from the course itself, and now I have a community of people that loved the content, were kind of impressed. For $97, we've got a lot. Really enjoyed it. And I asked them, what's next here, guys? Like, what else do you want? And they said, we have 700 of us here. It's really cool. We have some really great connections now. What if we had like more people? And I was like, well, more people aren't buying the course though. So what else could I do? Well, again, looking at the asset, now I had more connections online. I was like, well, why don't I just make the price less? Let's go low ticket. Let's go high volume. And so inside that community with the first 700 people, I had a $5 a month subscription that I launched. And we grew that over the course of 2 years to 3,500 people. Okay, now we're talking. That MRR thing that I didn't realize was a thing now was feeling really good. But to answer your question, I just looked at the resource that I had, the asset that I actually had, and I built for that. And guess what happens when you have 3,500 people paying $5 a month? People want to know how to build that thing, and they're willing to pay for that. Now I can launch my 5K thing, my 10K thing, my 48K thing, right? Yeah. So there is no right way. There really isn't. You just have to be really just open the peepers and look at your assets and build for that thing. Some people can launch a high ticket thing like that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because they have the inner circle that will go to war with them. They have the deep relationship and can just launch it like that. If that's you, I would highly encourage it. You've earned that right to have a high ticket thing. If you have more connections or are able to foster those relationships in the width and the breadth, go for the low ticket, high value type of offer. That's scalable.
And I love the way you said earn that right, because I think that to me was a light bulb, because I think that is one of the things I think so many people jump to the high ticket because it's self-serving.
For sure.
Right? And that's why it fails, right? Because the person on the other side is like, I mean, maybe you can do what you say you're going to do, but I have no trust that that's going to happen. And so that's a lot of money for me to kind of take that leap. Versus to your point, if you've earned that trust, you've earned that right through leading with value, frankly, right? By, offering more scalable products to build that community. And again, to your point, some may have already built that through 7 other ways. And so they've already built that trust. And so it's obvious that, okay, I can go to that, or I have some sort of unique expertise that is so important that I can just jump to that. But I like that kind of concept of, earn the right. And I just think of a lot of people I've interacted with that have been trying to go down that path. And it's like, well, because I think that's probably maybe the way I thought about it, but I don't think I've ever been able to articulate it quite that clear.
Sure. Yeah. And that phrase, earn the right, I picked that up from one of my clients, Les Patterson, which is case in point. And now I'm going to preface and backtrack a little bit. I do all of this organically. I'm an organic guy, so I don't do ads or anything like that. And that there's a time and place for ads. I'm not going to knock them. It's just not my thing. And with Les, we had been connected 2 or 3 years, very closely, had a great relationship before he ever purchased, and decided to work with me. I won't disclose, but he's invested over 5 figures to work with me. And that was 2 or 3 years into the relationship. And it wasn't intentional, like, oh, okay, the long game here with Les.
Yeah.
It's just like, Les called me one day. He's like, hey, man, I've got like a client call tomorrow. It's a big deal. I'm a little nervous. I'm not really sure how to have this conversation. What do you recommend? I was like, dude, let's hop on a call. I've got a 45-minute drive ahead of me. And walked him through kind of the process. And the next day he called me up. He's like, I just landed the biggest deal of my career. I'm like,
that's amazing.
Dude, that's amazing. Congratulations. You worked for it.
Yeah.
And then another year later, he becomes a client. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's awesome.
I'm not saying you have to go the long game. You have to do all these things, but you have the assets in front of you. Just look at it from a logic perspective of what's in front of me. What do I have access to? Then the equation starts to build itself towards that answer.
Michael, when you shared your story about the big goose egg, one of the things you said was, I have X number of social media followers. That's a pretty good number, and I would argue probably a bigger number than a lot of the folks listening who maybe are launching a product or have launched a product. Dustin and I have talked about this at length because we have some products and we sell. But I'm a firm believer that, especially if you're going to go the no ads route, you have to have some level of social currency. You have to have some level of followers. And I'm not just talking about, well, you've got friends and family, colleagues who follow you. You need to have built up some value with your audience before you can go and sell anything, at least in my opinion. How important do you think establishing a social media following is in the grand spectrum of all this stuff?
My personal belief, it's huge. It really is. That personal brand, social proof is really what we're talking about. Do other people like this person? Do other people respect their opinions and thoughts? And we could go on and on about the depth of what we're really talking about here. But I'll illustrate by just kind of telling my own story. What I think is really important is, I can personally, I have always been able to feel, I didn't really maybe mentally understand this, but I can feel when somebody's full of shit. Somebody's just doing this and there's nothing coming out. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know why, but that doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't feel like truth to me. It doesn't feel real to me.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, everybody else seems to like this person. Is it just me? Okay. And for a long time, I just never said that. Okay. Pause that story. Michael internally is like, I just don't feel confident in what I'm doing. I need to get stronger here. I just need to skill myself up and really build myself up. I'll spare the details, but I started to focus on Michael as a human. Do I do what I say I'm going to do, which is confidence, right? Am I showing up consistently? Am I pouring into myself? Am I putting on my own oxygen mask before I help the next person? All these things. But I actually started doing it for real. I started doing that personal development. And when I started to like kind of really now get back into the professional side of things online, I was like, wait a minute. I've done the personal work and I've built the businesses, and that's not true. And therefore, whether this person means to or not, they're actually hurting everybody that they're talking to. I don't like that. And I think little Mikey that was like, had a chip on his shoulder and wanted to prove himself and was like standing up against I don't know, whatever powers that were holding me back, started to say some things. Not directly. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not going to call out too many people because I don't know their story and I'm only looking at it from the outside in. But I started to really flex my muscle with my voice. And I would be like, hey, you might hear that this is what you need to do to build a business. But I'm going to tell you, I've done all those things. I've launched the course. I've done the thing. I tried to do a high ticket thing that was self-serving. It didn't work. I built the funnel. They said I was one funnel away, and that was 7,000 funnels ago. What the heck's going on here?
Damn you, Russell.
Not calling anybody out. Russell Brunson.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But what's really going on here? And I started to really look at it. I was like, oh, well, let's use Russell. He's a big boy. He knows this stuff. I was like, wait a minute. Russell's not selling me a funnel. But that's what he's telling me. He's selling a software for me to build my dream. He's not telling me to build a software. Why is that? That's weird. Isn't that different? Isn't that weird? And so I started to say these things out loud. And that flexing my confidence muscle, the fact that I've done it and I've been there, guys, I'm going to tell you, that's all it took for one person to say, wait a minute, I've been thinking this too. And you're willing to say it. You must have figured something out. You maybe did something different. Wait, what's going on here? Yeah, I would love to learn how you think about business and scale that over 9 years. Yeah. Right. So, I don't want to make it all about the personal development. I know we don't always want to talk about that. We want to talk about the revenue. We want to talk about the money and the stuff. But where does it really come from? How do we build something for real? And if you just follow that little thread, I think we'll find some interesting answers. So, yeah, I guess that's the nutshell version of, I think, what's really interesting when you start building a business.
Yeah, from a personal experience, and also some of the things I'm hearing you say is that it's not just about building connections or followers online. It's about also building meaningful relationships and taking the time to connect with people on a one-to-one level, engaging with other people. Because I see a lot of folks that just use social media very passively, one-sided. And engagement and relationships are reciprocational. It's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. But I have seen a lot of people attempt to build a personal brand just thinking all these people are going to come in because they post content and then not reciprocate or try to build relationships. And I do think that's a very important note for a lot of people to take from that part of the conversation, because it is really hard to build something if it's just self-serving.
Yeah. And going back to personal brand, and is it possible, or is it, important to have, social following and stuff like that? Yes and no. I mean, I know people that aren't using social media that do $12 million a year. They're just not on social. It's just not how they built it.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. There's no right or wrong. But when you start to really dive into what's important to you, you will build the thing appropriately. I just happened to like to experiment, get in the lab, see what's working, what's real, what's not. And then I just say it out loud. Guys, this doesn't work. This is what's working for me. And here's some results. If you like the results, cool. Let's have a conversation. If my results are infantile to you and you know something else, cool. Tell me about it. Right? That's it. That was my whole thing. But what I find in my close relationships is that personal brand and the social following comes from their own personal brand. If they're willing to just do the work and talk about what they've done, the experiments that they've made, it's game over. My friend Hunter, okay? When we first met, he owned a construction company. He wanted to have an event for men in business. Okay, the first event was good. It was really good. The second one, it was hyper specific because he realized a lot of the people in the audience owned roofing companies, and he owns a construction and roofing company. Maybe he can make it more specific. Would that help? Okay, so we had the first event. 45 people showed up. It was a very small event. Well, then he started talking about his business. Well, guys, I mean, last year we did $8 million in revenue. If that's cool to you, come to the event. We'll tell you how we did it. Next event, 800 people showed up. Right? He ended up selling his company for $48 million. A lot more people showed up the next year. Why? Because he was actually just going and doing the thing. More people showed up. I think their highest ticket sales was like 5,400 or something like that 2 years ago. And why? It's just because he was in the lab doing it and built a personal brand, launched 2 books, bestsellers. He's had speakers like Tom Bilyeu, Ed Mylett, John Maxwell, and a host of other amazing people, Jesse Itzler, on the stage at a roofing conference.
Yeah.
It works. That personal brand is gold, but you gotta start at the root. You can't just do the things and hope that the facade's going to do the trick for you. It's just not.
No doubt. Michael, that was awesome. A lot of gold nuggets buried in this conversation, and can't wait to have you back someday. Before we let you go, can you tell our audience where they can find you and what else you might have going on?
For sure. Yeah. Easiest. I'm a social being. You might have gathered that. So find me on social.
A little bit.
Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Threads. That's my 4 horsemen there. Follow me there. I have links that if you want to check out some of the stuff that we're actually doing, trainings and stuff like that. Otherwise, I would recommend just sending me a DM. Let me know that you heard me on this show. Maybe a takeaway that you got, whatever resonated with you, and let's start an actual conversation. That's me in my DMs. By the way, it's not anybody from the team or anything like that. I keep my DMs for me. And yeah, let's have a conversation there. And yeah, what do I have coming up next? Honestly speaking, I do want to get onto more stages and podcasts. And so I will be opening up 2025 for more of those opportunities. I think it's time. I kind of took the last year a little bit quieter, maybe a dozen or so shows and stages. So we're going to start opening that back up. And so if you have a favorite event coming up, let me know about it. Connect me with the organizer and maybe I'll be on stage.
Love it.
Sweet. Thanks so much for being here. To all the listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you haven't already, please consider leaving us a review. It only takes a second, but makes a big impact. We'll see you next time. Peace.